Thank you. And we're live now. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. This afternoon, we are gathered here to hear from submitters and objectors on two planning proposals. There are no development applications on the agenda. It will just be consideration of two planning proposals. And I'd just like to highlight right at the very beginning that this panel makes a recommendation to the council as opposed to making a determination. So we do not make the decision on the matters. It will be then our recommendation goes to the full council meeting. And can I also say that planning proposals are rather a hybrid because in fact, they are the very beginning of a stage of what we call a rezoning. And at this stage, they are just matters that are put up by proponents, and then they have to go through the process of an exhibition. So after today, it goes to the council with a recommendation. The council then make a decision as to whether it goes to Gateway, and that's the process. And it's not until after the decision is made about the Gateway that it would then move to what we call a draft local environmental plan, which is the planning proposal. So in fact, that is where there is full public consultation at the stage of exhibition once the council has decided that it goes through to a gateway or not. So I just thought I'd explain the process. I know that the community become very aware of planning proposals because often they are rather fully submitted in terms of documentation and whatnot, and they are available on the council's website as they should be because we are very transparent. And this planning panel, as I said, just makes that recommendation. Whereas when we have development applications before the panel, we make a determination on those development applications. I would just like to introduce myself. I'm Jan Morell and I chair this panel and have done for many, many years. And I sit on a number of local planning panels as chair and also as an expert member. I'm a town planner by profession, have about 40 years experience. I'll ask each panel member here today to introduce themselves so that you can understand their background as well. Thank you, Linda.
Linda McClure, I'm a planner with 40 years experience in local government and state government planning.
Michael Raymond, lawyer.
Ken Robinson, I'm the community representative on the panel. I have about 40 years of experience as an environmental scientist and planner, and I'm a resident of North Sydney.
Thank you. And before we commence, I'll just say this is the official recording of the public meeting and there are no other recordings allowed to take place. So this is the official recording that council then have in keepsake. Before we do commence, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, past, present and emerging. So we'll move through to the first item, which is item number 1, 15 Alistair Street, Cremorne, and this is to amend the North Sydney Local Environmental Plan for 15 Alistair Street as a heritage item, to identify it as a heritage item under the council's local environmental plan. I do have just, I don't have any objectors, unless there's anybody out there that's tuned in that would like to make a representation. But no, I don't have any objectors or submitters, but I do have Gary McDonald representing the owners. So could Mr. McDonald, would you please address the panel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my name is Gary McDonald, Associate Director of GBA Heritage. I have been advised that the property owner has withdrawn the current DA from council. The owner has now submitted a new DA to council that will retain the existing building and proposes reuse with a new adjoining block on the adjacent property to the south. The owner does not seek to demolish 15 Alistair Street, even if the building is not listed on the LEP. I might, if I can, try to just share. I thought perhaps if we have an image, I'm not sure if you can see that at all.
We will allow you to share. Can you arrange that, Peter?
You have to share some, yeah.
Yes. You are sharing now, yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. Okay, I wasn't sure, but okay, that's right. Thank you very much. I just put up the image of the existing structure, and I'll try and follow with other more impressive Art Deco buildings in the local government area. We respond to 5 of the 7 Heritage New South Wales criteria put forward by others that its significance satisfies the threshold for heritage listing on the LEP. It is our contention that the proposed listing does not satisfy any of the criteria for heritage listing. And we in fact question the description of it being Art Deco functionalist in style. The first criterion, cultural history, I might just bring up, just as an example, another image, just to give an example of what other buildings are around of this style. The first criterion, cultural history, 15 Alistair Street has incidental or unsubstantiated connections with historically important activities or processes. Criterion B, special association with a person. It has incidental or unsubstantiated connections with historically important people. The only person that has a potentially important connection to the site is the architect, Clifford Finch. However, this building is not particularly distinguished in the context of his other more accomplished design. Again, I might just bring up another design of an Art Deco building for comparison. Criterion C, aesthetic characteristics. The subject building is not a remarkable design undertaken by a famous architect. The building does not demonstrate any creative or technical innovation or achievement for its period. It is not aesthetically significant and has typical elements of Art Deco design, none of which can be regarded as distinctive. And again, I'll perhaps just provide another image for comparison. Criterion F.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry, Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
We haven't seen the other examples up on the screen.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm not sure. Perhaps. Well, I might. I've got it. I have it up on my screen, but if you're not seeing anything different.
Is the stop sharing ratio?
Nothing different has come up.
Maybe stop sharing and then reshare it.
Okay.
That may help.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. Does that come up?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's a bit of a process. And unless I could always come back to you, perhaps in discussion, but I'm conscious of the limited time. So I'm just, again, indicating a comparison there.
Sorry, Mr. McDonald, where did you say that one was?
This particular one is in North Sydney, in the area. I'm not sure if that's down at Carrabba Point, but I could.
No, that's okay. I'm just curious. And you're saying that this, I just lost the point. Are you saying that this is a better representative or more remarkable?
Yes.
example?
Yes, I am. I think it is important to compare obviously the subject building with other examples in the government area of North Sydney, so that it then becomes, dare I say, a little more apparent that the subject building in Alistair Street is not, to put it bluntly, particularly fantastic or different, and therefore brings into question the whole rationale for listing. So I'll just perhaps leave this image there as a form of comparison. I'll just go on criterion F, which is uncommon aspects. 15 Alistair Street is certainly not rare as an Art Deco building, which there are numerous and better examples in the community. As such, its type is not under threat. And the last criterion that's suggested that it reaches heritage listing is principal characteristics. While the subject building presents as an example of the Art Deco style, it cannot be regarded as being at the important end of the numerous and representative collection of this style. Our assessment is that the subject property is not worthy of heritage listing on the LEP. Now, I'm happy to perhaps go back to some of the images if you'd like, although it seems to be a slightly lengthy process to bring up a different image. But yes, essentially, we do not think that 15 Alistair Street compares very favourably or particularly has distinctive characteristics that would warrant heritage listing. Thank you. I think I'll...
And just before you go, Mr.
Yes.
McDonald, the image that you have currently up in front of us, is
Yes.
is that listed?
I don't believe so, no. No, in fact, I don't think it may be in a conservation area, but I don't believe it is listed, no. And in fact, that's one of the arguments we have from our heritage impact statement, that there are a lot of Art Deco buildings in the North Sydney government area that are probably more distinguished, but in fact, as I understand it, they aren't listed, even though some of them are, of course, in conservation areas.
Okay, now I just need to ask you a question because you opened your comments by saying that the applicant has withdrawn the application to demolish number 15 Alistair.
Yes.
And is about to or has submitted a new development application to retain it.
That is correct, that as I believe, or I was advised that they have submitted a new de-application just in the last few days. And the reason being is that they thought it would, shall we say, be wise to pursue a retention of the existing building in case, of course, there were issues of demolition. And once they've gone through a refinement of the design that includes the existing building, they found, in fact, that the result was actually rather good. So, in other words, they're happy to proceed with the new DA with the existing building intact, with an add-on to the south, and so that's their current position, and they would proceed with that DA with an addition to the existing, regardless of whether the existing building is listed, heritage listed or not. So they're quite happy to leave the building and try and keep it largely intact as well, of course.
So I just need to understand, are you saying that the owner doesn't want it listed as a heritage item?
Well, the argument we'd have is that we're putting that, irrespective of perhaps whether the owner would like it listed or whether they proceed or not, we still don't think as heritage consultants that the current building there is sufficiently distinguished to warrant listing. And hence, although they'll still proceed and happy to proceed with it as part of their development application, we are of the view that it simply is not warranted to be listed to meet the threshold of local listing on the LEP.
Okay, I just then need to ask you some questions about
Sure.
the interior.
Yes.
Because if it's listed as a heritage item,
Yes.
clearly that has implications for not refurbishment, but for adaptation.
Yes, correct.
To the new residences. So is that a reason as to why they wouldn't want it listed, or are they interested in retaining the outside of it, or because I'm not privy to the new DA.
Yes.
Or are they interested in preserving parts of the features interior? Or
Right.
I'm just trying to understand what
Sure.
the DA requires.
Yes. No, they would understand that an important part of its reuse, and indeed the appeal of the building, can be, of course, the retention of the interior features as well. And part of our job as their heritage advisors would be to work with their architect to ensure that the important interior features are retained. Now, it would be expected that in order to bring this building up to contemporary amenity, as you'd expect, that there would probably be required some intervention, but we'd try to maintain the important features. Although I'd have to say that there is also an opportunity that one of the reasons why the building is not, shall we say, all that good is that you have the ground floor garages, which are rather obvious with their doors, which is not a particularly endearing feature of the building. Their proposal would remove those doors and turn the ground floor into accommodation. So in a way, it can present itself as potentially an improvement to the streetscape presentation of the building. So we would regard it as, shall we say, a usual exercise in maintaining the main features of the building intact, both interior and exterior, but trying to reuse it for obviously contemporary living.
Thank you. I'll just go to the other members. I'm sure they might have some questions as well.
Certainly.
Michael? Linda?
No, thank you.
No? Okay then. So at the end of the day, the applicant has put in a new development application which retains the heritage building, but with some adaptation for contemporary living, and clearly changes even in terms of the external, such as the removal of the existing garage doors. But your assessment as a heritage consultant is that it doesn't warrant, or it doesn't meet the criteria for the listings as required.
I think generally not, no. In fact, I think the problem that I noticed in the council's external advisor is that they refer to it as an Art Deco functionalist building. And I think that is a misnomer. I don't think it is, in fact, could be regarded as functionalist. And part of their argument is that Art Deco functionalist is in fact quite rare in the North Sydney area. I think that it isn't functionalist in the sense that functionalist tends to refer in modernist architecture to an attempt to remove decoration and to, in effect, streamline it. Functionalist is more along the lines of what you know, perhaps as the P&O style. It tries to streamline the building. It has strong horizontal lines with some vertical contrast. And in fact, decoration is tried to be kept to a minimum. Whereas the existing building, in fact, has quite a bit of brickwork, decorative brickwork.
Yep.
And I think, therefore, I mean, it's just Art Deco, yes, but we couldn't agree that it's functionalist. And hence, that's part of our argument that it does not really come under that particular style that they have nominated, and from which a lot of their argument for rarity is based.
Right, so I still need to clarify in terms of understanding that your client, or not so much your client, but you as an expert are against the listing as it's been reported.
Correct, yes. I think this building does not particularly distinguish itself to warrant listing. That's correct.
Thank you. Very well. So if there are no further questions, I'll thank you very much for addressing the panel today and helping it understand your position or your point of view, and understand the threat of the demolition of the building is no longer here as such, but nonetheless it's to be retained in the future redevelopment, and you would question though the way it's been described. So we do understand your address to the panel. Very well.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yes, so we will be making a determination, or rather a recommendation on this particular matter, and it will be available on the website by the latest next Monday.
Oh, fine.
If not earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
So now that takes us to the next item on the agenda, and we do have a number of people who wish to address the panel. So the next item on the agenda is item number 2, which is 1 to 7 Rangers Road and 50 Yeo Street, Neutral Bay. And this is for an increase to the maximum building height control from 16 metres to part 30 and part 40, and increase the minimum non-residential floor space ratio control from 0.5 to 1.7 to 1. And we do have a number of people wishing to address the panel. And I first of all call, and because we have some, I think 12 people or so registered to speak, I will ask, or more actually, I will ask people to keep it to, you know, not to repeat themselves. If you agree with previous submitters, by all means say so. We're not going to cut people off, but given that we'll be hearing and we've had the benefit of seeing the submissions and aware of the submissions. So can I just first of all invite Meredith Trevelyan-Jones, Chair of the Willoughby Bay Precinct, to address the panel.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel members. So yes, my name's Meredith Trevelyan-Jones, as Chair of the Willoughby Bay Precinct, and for a number of years prior to that, I was involved with Brightmoor Precinct, the adjacent precinct, which includes part of Neutral Bay Town Centre. So I'm quite aware of the Neutral Bay Town Centre. I have also recently attended a number of other precinct meetings, and I've heard a variety of concerns about this planning proposal. And the concerns are very much the same as those expressed during the community consultation for the now rescinded Military Road Corridor planning study. So the concerns are, we don't want an increase in height, it'll set a precedent, there'll be loss of village atmosphere, there'll be traffic congestion, there'll be overshadowing. If you were looking for a site in Neutral Bay Town Centre where an increase in height and density would cause the maximum adverse impacts, you'd be hard pressed to go beyond this site. It's on the southern fringe of Neutral Bay Town Centre with the land sloping to the south. That results in maximum overshadowing of residential properties to the south. And there's the car park entrance on Yeo Street. With the introduction of the B-line buses, restrictions have been placed on turning left onto Military Road during morning peak. And this is to improve traffic flow on Military Road, but the result has been to funnel a lot of traffic onto Yeo Street. And so it's one lane each way, and any vehicle turning right into the Woolworths car park will block the flow of traffic, and that happens at the moment. And the planning proposal does not address the morning peak, so we have no information on the effect that it would have. The report in front of you says that the proposed podium heights are inappropriate to the village scale of the centre, and I would agree with that. In fact, if you look at the artist's impression of the reference scheme, It looks pretty much like the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. It's completely out of scale. The open plaza increases the retail frontage of the development. This is retail design 101, so commercially understandable. And it accommodates a fair amount of seating for cafes and food outlets. Overall, it looks more like a commercial benefit for the development, dressed up and sold as a public benefit. At the Woolworths community consultation session, I asked the planner, why does Woolworths need 10 stories? And I was told it was so the public plaza could be provided. I asked whether that meant they would be arguing to this planning panel that residents being able to enjoy a coffee in the plaza outweighs the overshadowing of residential properties to the south. Of course, I didn't get an answer to that, but that is exactly what is being proposed. I understand that Woolworths now say they will amend the proposal from 10 stories to 8 stories and from 91 apartments to 70 apartments. We haven't seen any amended plans. I would comment that the reference scheme for the 10-story solution shows 1-bedroom apartments ranging in size from 65 to 88 square metres, with the average size of 76 square metres, 2-bedroom apartments ranging in size from 88 to 145 square metres, average size 103 square metres, and 3-bedroom apartments ranging from 104 to 398 square metres, with an average size of 149 square metres. For comparison, the smallest 2-bedroom apartment in the reference scheme at 88 square metres is larger than the typical 2-bedroom apartments in recent neutral bay development applications, which are typically 83 to 85 square metres. I believe an 8-storey building would accommodate around 100 apartments, not 70. I believe it is important that council's revised planning study be completed, and preferably including a TMAP, a transport management and accessibility plan, without being compromised by a one-off ad hoc proposal. I ask that the panel endorse the strategic planner's recommendations, and thank you for allowing me to address you today.
Thank you very much. I think I missed somebody on the first on the list was Glenn Courier. Glenn, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, oh, thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Glenn Courier and I'm from Neutral Precinct and speaking on behalf of the members of Neutral Precinct. And I just want to say Meredith's, thank her for her words, because we agree with absolutely everything which she said, so I won't rehash there. And we've heard the same thing secondhand, that they've reduced it down to 8 stories and increased the size of the store because that was of concern to our members in particular. So we thank them for doing that. I'd also like to say that as a rule, many members of Neutral Precinct, we're not outside minorly exceeding planning controls if there's a public benefit, but in this case, there doesn't really seem to be. Our main concerns centre around a number of things, predominantly traffic, the overshadowing and planning controls. And I'll just go through each of those individually. The first issue is the access to the store by delivery trucks. If we're coming from the Harbour Bridge, there's 3 right turns off Military Road between the Warringah Freeway and getting to Cremorne. The reality is most GPSs will default to Watson Street. Some will go for Murdoch Street, but in reality, almost every truck will go down there. For those who are familiar with the area, Yeo Street is a particularly narrow street. It's and just to give a little bit of familiarity, when it passes over Ben Boyd Road, there is actually a swerve in the centre double yellow lines. They literally swerve near enough to a metre to accommodate the unusually small street. It's quite concerning. When we get to Wickham Road, which is not far from the subject site, we actually have a staggered stop there so that the buses can turn around because it's a bus route as well. So it's a particularly hard and torturous route. It also goes past Neutral Bay Public School. And that is a no-go zone for most people who are familiar with the area. My courier will not drive past there at 3 o'clock and literally says that, I'm sorry, I can't deliver to you around that time because it's too busy. And that's with the parents dropping off. And also, in case that they'd gone Murdoch Street, we have Redlands School there. So 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning are particularly poor times for this access way, particularly poor in every which way. So it's a very, plus it's a very hard street and very hard access. It actually, by comparison, Woolworth's old site, which is now owned by Coles, would be a far better site to do this development. As Meredith said, this is a particularly unsatisfactory site in how it works. The other issue is when they actually finally get down to Military Lane, which is the small lane, not Military Road, it's the small access lane to the loading dock, the trucks often have to reverse in. So they block both lanes. And again, because of the access that we can't get out in the morning onto Military Road, people are forced onto Yeo Street. So Yeo Street is a secondary road now by default. And to have a semi-reversing in is just ludicrous at any time. And to encourage more of it is quite hard. Now, once we get down there, and I'd like to go a little bit further on Military Lane, what happens there, and we have a number of residents who live by, it's now crowded with, we've gone through the trucks delivering to the store. What's now happening is it's getting crowded with the small home delivery trucks actually delivering out of the store. And that's an issue we'd really like to address here because it hasn't been addressed in this proposal. And the reality, is it appropriate? The truth is the area we're in, it is zoned for residential and it is zoned for retail. But when those zonings were thought of, retail meant a shop which people went to, they purchased goods and then they left. It didn't mean running a fleet of delivery trucks. And the truth is, these guys are trying to run a warehouse and they're same with their Crow's Nest site, totally unsatisfactory. What they have is they're changing the use of retail sites to warehouses. And that is what I believe why they initially chose and why people were told why they wanted to reduce the size of the store, literally by the size of a 2-bedroom unit, which is quite a bit. So the reality is they should have a ghost shop. They should have a warehouse at Artarmon if they want to service the North Shore. The shops we're talking about, which are in our area and out Mossman, Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest is totally unsatisfactory for delivery trucks. There's one tiny lane access. Funnily enough, we have one tiny lane access here because that wasn't the intention when these sites were purchased, when it was never the intention to run a warehouse. So by default, and I recognise that retail has changed and people's expectations, this just isn't the right site for a warehouse. St Leonard's is the right site for a warehouse. They could have delivery trucks, proper loading docks. It would be a tremendous location. So that is very much a concern for us. And it's a concern that by default, they're trying to change the zoning. And we just don't think it's appropriate under any circumstances. The other issue we've got is, of course, with the overshadowing. It's just enormous. The reality is everyone who's on Yeo Street is predominantly 2-storey, 8 stories on the very other side of the road, on the northern side, is just going to overshadow. There is no, there's residents here, I can see them here, and I'm sure they're going to speak to that. And I cannot imagine the personal effect it would have on these people. But the reality is it's shocking. There's no other way to describe it. And the truth is the small public benefit, it's a food court. That's not a public benefit, it's a food court. You know, I mean, that's the reality of what we're talking about. We're happy to swap something for something. When there was at the previous Woolworths where they were going to swap it for an underground car park and a park, that sounded pretty good. A food court's, that's a bit could it be anywhere? In fact, from the view of the residents on the other side of the road, and this is in absolute reality, this has about as much benefit to them as when Woolworths became the largest poker machine owner in Australia. It's about making money, not benefiting the community. And that's the reality about this. So in summary, we're not for it, as blunt as that. We object to it. We think it's totally inappropriate, predominantly on those issues. Zoning, using a retail area as a warehouse, inappropriate, and creating many traffic movements, which we don't need. The actual traffic issue, which is enormous, and this is the wrong site for that style of development. And of course, the overshadowing, which is terrifically harsh on the residents. So those are our three largest points which we're against it for. Thank you very much for listening to me.
And thank you very much. Now, can I call on Alexandra Serafimowska? Yes, thank you. You're on mute at the moment. Could you just take, yes, thank you. Yep.
Thank you for your time, the panel. I'm the resident at 57 Year Street, the building right opposite the car park. I completely 110% behind Meredith and Glenn. We have the property for nearly 20 years and we saw how the traffic was going. Through all these time changes, we used to have a Franklin's at the time with the small businesses, and now this enormous building, which is totally gonna overshadow our building, particularly the ground floor and first floor people, they can't have a sunlight. And it's not only our building, but many others in vicinity. I would like you to consider that as a priority. The other thing is, what about the traffic is not only the 9 and 3 o'clock, also the Saturdays when the people are dropping off kids for sports, and people who are during a week at work and now they do shopping. It's absolutely impossible. Honestly, I'm scared of the safety of the residents, because we have even a bike rides are doing here on Yale Street. The trucks, the buses, everything goes. It's like, instead of a street, I would put it's a highway. As a resident, I can see the whole frequent movements on that street. The other thing is, we are not against the development, but in the current controls. And I can show you, if you don't mind, I will show you the picture to share with you.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. This is the photo of a current Woolworths. What is wrong with this building? Why Woolworths cannot come with a proposal with the current buildings? The 3-story in front, and there is on a 4th level go at the back and the 5th level. Then we'll reduce the overshadowing, and it's I completely understand that they would like to do development, and it's fine with it, but in these controls, and it are exactly the same as adjacent properties. Why Woolworths would like to be different than the other 2 neighbors? And also, I honestly don't like to encourage precedent, because if we're gonna go with this, our small community environment will be destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I now call on Barry Ford? Barry Ford, are you there? Yep.
How's that?
Yes.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Well, it's all. Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's all been said by Glenn and Alexandra. I'm a resident, and I'm on the strata committee of the apartments at the Rangers Road, Yeo Street end. So I'm overly concerned. Like Alexandra, we do not support the development as it is currently proposed. But however, we do accept that whatever is finally approved is going to impact significantly Yeo Street, Ranges Road, Wickham Road. And Glenn has already spoken about the other end of the street. Yeo Street, is a narrow residential street, or it was. It's now become a street, that a lot of us call a rat run. And people who are using that street now in the peak hours of morning and evening are not local destination people. They are people who are just coming through and are allowed to, of course, from Mossman, Cremorne, using that street as an alternative to Military Road, using it as an alternative more and more than Murdoch, Bannerman. And in the 3 or 4 years that I've been involved at this end of the street, by the month it's just become more and more congested. Now we must accept that that local destination traffic is going to grow. So whatever the development is that's finally approved, we know there's going to be more local destination. We accept that, but it's going to have to be better managed. And by definition, that to me seems as though you can only better manage it for the local destination by restricting more and more the through traffic. So, having read the traffic study that was submitted with the proposal, it was, in my view, completely incomplete. And there were, estimates that said minor traffic growth. And this is just very, very misleading, because we've got traffic problems now. We're going to have more and more growth in the traffic that's not even related to the development, and the development just makes it worse. For example, I'll give you some classic casual observations. Last week, I was coming out of the Muse building. It was 8:30 in the morning during the week. Was turning right to go towards Watson. Traffic was blocked up. Took me 10 minutes or 5 minutes to get out onto the street. And on my slow path down past the school, I counted 7 buses, all empty, 4 of them state buses, which were either going to a destination to start a route or were going to have driver training in them. 2 of the buses were school buses, which were empty, and 1 was a tourist bus, empty. And people more and more are being diverted off Military Road both ways just to get to avoid Military Road, and they're using Yeo Street as their choice at the moment. Another little observation, which I think is significant, and I wish I was a policeman, at the Yeo Street Ranges Road end, Yeo Street curves around to stop at the junction with Ranges Road. That's a pedestrian crossing, which it should be. There is North Sydney parking on both sides of the narrow street. Yeo Street has double lines on the street all the way to Watson Street. But if you look at the double lines on the curve at the Ranges Road end, they've gone. They've been worn out because personal, the private vehicles and the buses and the commercial traffic can't turn the corner without going over the double lines. They don't exist anymore. So ultimately, you're going to end up with a massive, massive accident of some sort. So, I think in finalising my view about the whole matter and those of our committee and residents, we cannot have a final development approval without some sort of independent traffic study. And this has got to, whether it's a study that's independent but supported by state and local government, there are vehicle volume and size reviews that need to be done. There are restrictions on non-local vehicle destinations that need to be addressed. And I'm, unfortunately for the council, I think they need to address the parking on both sides of a very narrow street. It's just going nowhere. And finally, Woolworths want to ultimately close down the building, or they have to, on the other side of Military Road. And I'm sure that they expect to get loyal customers diverting from the other side across to this side. The building, the Woolworths building, the Woolworths store is not going to be any bigger. Throughput will be higher, and they're just going to finance that, whatever it is, a warehouse or just a shop, by converting the fresh air above the building into residence. And then it impacts, of course, Yeo Street on the other side of the road as well. So please, no development without something done about an independent study of the traffic and the congestion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ford. And could I now call on Peter Moore? Thank you. You're still on mute.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to address the committee. I'm afraid I'm going to repeat what's been said by previous speakers, and they've probably done it.
Yes. But if you just agree, you can also just mention the topic, and
yeah. Well,
we've all taken very extensive notes.
I live in Rangers Road. I live in the Monterey building directly opposite Woolworths, and I'm representing a number of residents in our building and our strata committee who are very opposed to this proposal in its current form, and even as modified by a recent update which we received two days ago, which reduced the height from 10 stories down to 8. We're opposed to any developments that raise the building height above that currently allowed of 16 metres. We'd certainly not be opposed to a development that remained within the height restriction and was a similar height to the relatively new development, the Muse apartment block next door that Barry lives in. Nice looking building. I don't see why Woolworths needs to build something that's higher than that and outside the current restrictions. We wonder what the point is of council having a local environment plan restricting building heights. If developers can have planning proposals accepted that do not comply. It's a great mystery. But we're also very concerned about the impact that the development will have on traffic in Yeo Street, Rangers Road and Watson. The proposed development doesn't intend to increase the actual size of the current Woolworths store itself, but the substantial increase in residences and retail shop outlets in the so-called public plaza and the substantially increased underground parking facility, we believe will substantially increase traffic flows. It's already been mentioned several times, Watson, Yeo Street, Rangers Road are narrow suburban streets already under considerable pressures, particularly at school drop-off times, pick-up times, Saturday mornings. A very important point, we think, the only access to the site to incoming traffic, including all the delivery vehicles from the west along Military Road, is to turn right off Military Road at Watson and then proceed down Yeo Street. It's the only way incoming traffic that's coming from the west can get to the site. So Yeo Street is critical. It already contains a large primary school, a synagogue, a church, a daycare centre, a fire and rescue station, and in the as already been pointed out, in the vicinity of the school and the fire and rescue station, Yeo Street is particularly narrow, such that trucks and buses going in opposite directions cannot pass each other easily. Heaven knows what happens if there's an emergency and the fire and rescue people need to get out of their building, because I doubt if they'll be able to if this development goes ahead. It's not surprising that the traffic assessment submitted along with the proposal concludes after 168 pages that there'll be no significant traffic impact. It was, after all, commissioned by the applicant. And it doesn't mention the narrowness of Yeo Street. It doesn't mention the existence of the school, of the church, or the fire and rescue station, nor does it refer in any way to the requirement of all the incoming traffic, including deliveries coming from the west, to turn off Military Road at Watson and then proceed down Yeo Street. That's a glaring omission. As already been pointed out by others, between Warringah Freeway and Spit Junction, there are a few places that traffic travelling eastwards along Military Road can turn right to access those parts of Neutral Bay, Cremorne and Mossman that are to the right of Military Road. Watson and Yeo Street and Rangers Road thus have become major thoroughfares for much of this traffic. We recognise that no single development has a major impact on traffic congestion. It's the cumulative effect of all of the developments that are increasing housing density in this area that are having such an impact on our streets. The Woolworths proposal is just one more development that will contribute to the already considerable congestion that is experienced on these streets and on Military Road. And we're also very concerned about the precedent that this proposal will set for future directions. Allowing one more development to proceed despite the current height restrictions will set a very unacceptable precedent for future directions. Finally, I'd just like to mention that the proposed development makes a great deal about supplying a public plaza, and the glossy brochure shows a beautiful 3D rendered pictorial view. I went to the Community Information Centre about 2 weeks ago, and they had a beautiful fancy 3D computer generated fly through of the plaza up on a big screen in the room. It looked like Hyde Park. This drawing is very deceptive. The planned plaza is actually only 14 metres by 44 metres, which is considerably smaller than an Olympic swimming pool. By the time tables and chairs are spread around the perimeter for alfresco dining, there'll be very little public space left, I think, for us to enjoy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. And Nee McCulloch. Thank you. If you can take yourself off mute. You're still on mute, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also to the panel as well for this meeting. I live at 61. I should advise that I am a shareholder of Woolworths, albeit minuscule. 1,000 shares do not represent very much in the scheme of things today. But having said that, I have been a resident of 61 Yeo Street since for more than 20 years. And I was also part of the agitation, if you like, of the local residents when the redevelopment for this site was commenced in 2005, which the development ended up in the Land and Environment Court. I just want to advise a couple of interesting points from this. Having said that, I agree with all the speakers thus far and can only commend them for their diligent work and articulate information and concur with everything they've said. In 2005, Mr. Thomas, the Woolworths representative, gave evidence in the court which advised that Grosvenor Street was over trading at that stage with an annual turnover of 75.2 million. Rangers Road store estimate for the annual turnover once completed was 35 million, and it would reduce the Grosvenor Street store by 55 million, which compounded a bit, when add figures together, was between 90 to 95 million. That's 2005. And up until the pandemic, of course, their increase was probably higher than their proposed rate of 2 to 3%, compounding per annum. With the Rangers Road store was only classified and met the standard of a C grade store for Woolworths initially in 2005. In the last 4 months, they have increased the number of product lines to make it look appealing, so that when they transition to the new store, we can replicate what we already have. And that's our offering. It is, compared to the Grosvenor Street store, a very small offering of product lines. So how that's just an amenity, which I doubt will be replicated in the new store, although they say they will. But the more important fact is that Woolworths will want to keep that level of revenue. And using a residential development to ameliorate some of their expenditure and probably very quickly cover the cost of the redevelopment, the proposed number of dwellings, as we have all appreciated, is excessive. I would strongly recommend that we go back and look at the outcomes from the 2005 Land and Environment Court findings. In particular, the number of deliveries that were not just recommended, but they were agreed and confirmed by Woolworths, that they agreed to a maximum of 35 deliveries per day. I would like to see that maintained. It after all is the current restrictions that they face. Is there any need to change that? The other restrictions are the hours of operation. The operation of the dock would be Monday to Saturday from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Sundays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that I would like to see retained. The trading hours for the store were from Monday to Saturday from 7 a.m. and on Sunday from 8 a.m. and all times to be closed by 10 p.m. Once again, I'd like to see that, and I can confirm that's exactly what the closing time was last night. So I believe that it is, it gives us some amenity back, which we like the balance. We are also very concerned at Yeo Street, 61 Yeo Street, obviously of the large increase in traffic. We have small children who are resident in our complex, and I'm sorry to say that they, having got 2 grandsons under the age of 5, not particularly controllable and in danger of just breaking loose and taking off. So traffic is the #1 consideration. I particularly witnessed a truck driver, and this plays into what Peter was saying, and also Barry, that the reason why the only access point is our offering is Rangers Road, is that the ability for a truck of any length to turn left from the eastbound lane of Yeo Street is impossible. The turning circle is not wide enough. It cannot make the turn, literally cannot make the turn. So the only access way they have is coming from the Rangers Road end down the eastbound lane. And then I watched this truck stop on the eastbound lane and reverse across the westbound lane. Oh, not very clever. So to do that, and then he could reverse into Military Lane and then reverse into the loading dock. So sure, as you suggest, the small delivery vehicles can fit down the eastbound lane, no problems, but it's the larger delivery vehicles which are the big issue. Just as a case at point I know in the UK, they have had a proliferation of these warehouse type establishments for food deliveries, and which are not open to the public. They are only a shop. They're not even a shop front. They are only set up as warehouses, and they are currently banning them. So I think we should be ahead of the game and we stop it before it starts. Basically, that's all I really have to say, other than to support everything else that everyone has said, and very much in favour of keeping the height of the buildings at the current LEP level that North Sydney Council have in situ at present, and can only say if Helm could build a building on the corner of Rangers and Yeo Street to a satisfactory level that complied with North Sydney Council, why can't Woolworths? So with all of that, thank you very much for allowing me to speak and your attendance to my speech.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCulloch. And I do have Kathleen Fairley, but I believe you've decided you don't require to be heard, but by all means, I didn't want to leave you out. Are you online at all? No, very well. It's not
talking actually down the bottom.
There's someone talking down the bottom.
I believe Kathy Fairley has declined to speak to the group.
Very well. Well, we have heard everybody's concerns and their submissions. And as I said, we've also got the benefit of the written submissions. I would now like to invite the applicants team to address the panel. This will allow the panel only to ask questions of the applicants team. But can I ask of the applicants team that you address some of the issues that have been raised as you've heard them in your address to the panel. So I've got Richard Armitage. Are you there? Richard Armitage? You're on mute, I'm sorry. Still on mute? Yep. Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Richard Armitage?
Yes.
Yes, one moment. And Georgia Wilson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
The architect, thank you. And Ben Craig, the planner. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here as well.
You're there as well. Okay, so if you can keep your cameras on, and I mean, we're in your hands as to how you wish to address the panel. As I said, if you can respond to some of the issues you've heard as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak first.
Yes.
So good afternoon. My name's Richard Armitage, and I'm one of the development managers working for Woolworths. I'd like to give you a bit of background to our planning proposal and what we have done in collaboration with council and what we were trying to achieve. The genesis for our project was an opinion piece written by one of the councillors about 5 years ago. It described Neutral Bay as a suburb divided by 6 lanes of traffic on Military Road, a place dominated by cars, a place with little public open space, and a nighttime economy or a true town centre. Council ultimately embarked on the preparation of a strategy paper to address some of those perceived deficiencies in Neutral Bay. Over a 3-year period, it developed master plans for a number of sites, including our own, and adopted a town centre strategy at the beginning of 2021. During the development of that strategy, Woolworths worked closely with council to deliver a number of key initiatives. We engaged in a cooperative, collegiate and collaborative manner with both the councillors and the council planners to realise some of council's visions. Ultimately, we agreed to incorporate 25% of our site in a future development for the creation of a new public plaza. Our current scheme includes the provision of over 60 public parking spaces, We have maintained employment generating space, a through site link to Yo Street, and designed a scheme we believe will foster a nighttime economy. Fundamentally, what our scheme attempts to do is to create a new town centre. It creates safe public space away from Military Road, a place where people can meet, children can play, and people can eat and shop. It's an exercise in urban regeneration and renewal. It tries to replicate some of the success of our joint ventures with councils in Double Bay and Lane Cove. It aims to significantly improve the tired and rundown urban landscape on the southern side of Military Road. During the latter half of 2021, we extensively engaged with council's planning staff concerning the preparation of our planning proposal. 2 weeks before lodgement, the Military Road Corridor strategy paper was rescinded. We have elected to lodge a planning proposal because we do not have the ability to do so when the new planning study comes into effect, or will not. Over the last 4 weeks, Woolworths has voluntarily run a number of community consultation sessions for local residents. The key takeout of those sessions was that a development of up to 10 stories was considered too high. Woolworths has taken on board the community sentiment and has formally notified both council and the community that it is willing to proceed with a development comprising 6 and 8 stories rather than the original 7 and 10 stories. In summation, I'd like to reiterate that this is a once in a generation opportunity to create a new town centre in Neutral Bay and to engage in some urban renewal and regeneration of the southern side of Military Road. Given council's 4-year extensive involvement with the site, it clearly has strategic and site significant importance, and we believe our scheme has sufficient merit that the planning panel should support the planning proposal. Would you like me to answer any questions?
Well, first of all, we could probably hear from your team, but I'm a little bit, on the one hand, I did notice that you had sent something in dated the 7th of September, but that was after the report had been written and there's been no assessment as such. So
that's right.
Reference to it is difficult because we are assessing the planning proposal as it was submitted.
Yeah, I understand that.
And not the modification or the apparent modification that seems to have been submitted. So just wanted to be clear that this panel can only deal with the planning proposal as submitted and not with any modifications that you may have, and that would be subject to a separate assessment or a further assessment as such.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, okay. And you're not asking for us to defer our decision to allow an assessment of that. You're just asking us to make a decision today. Is that right?
Well, I think that's for the panel.
Not a decision. We're making a recommendation only, as I said to the council.
Yes. You're making a recommendation. I guess as part of that recommendation, consideration possibly is given on whether or not the council should, when there's a recommendation from the panel, that the council should actually consider that amendment.
Well, we can't consider the amendment. I've just said that.
I'm not saying whether the panel considers the amendment, about whether or not the council should look at that amendment.
I think, as I understand it, the council has got its hands tied in terms of the period of time in which it has to respond to planning proposals. And I don't know whether there would be the opportunity within the time frame to be able to do that. And there hasn't been sufficient information submitted in any event. So that would be a matter for you to then pursue with the council as to whether you're asking for it to either be withdrawn or amended prior to their consideration. But as you can appreciate, this panel today can only consider what's been assessed and in front of it.
We'll keep carrying on with our response, and then I think probably have some discussion after that, perhaps, Madam Chair.
Yep. Thank you, Georgia.
Great, thank you. Thanks, panel. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Georgia Wilson. I'm speaking on behalf of Koichi Takata Architects. So we were the architect for this application. I think as Richard touched on, obviously the consultation that was done with council was done on the basis of what had been looked at in the Military Road Corridor Strategy document. And I think there were some fantastic initiatives in that document that were done to look at providing community benefit to the residents of Neutral Bay, providing employment generating floor space, of course, responding to a need for more high quality residential amenity, more housing, and also the need for high quality public space in Neutral Bay. I think this was done after a lot of community consultation, and of course we've continued that throughout the process of the planning proposal. But I think we can all acknowledge that there is a lack of high quality outdoor community landscape and public place or public plazas in Neutral Bay. There is a small plaza, the May Gibbs Plaza. It's not well used. It doesn't incorporate, street furniture. It's shaded. And second to that, there's a couple of very small retail arcades. But I think Neutral Bay as a town centre is really, it's lacking a centralised or high quality public open space. So that has really been the focus of this development. It's almost 25% of our site area that is dedicated to that public open space. Acknowledging that there is a buffer around the edge of that plaza for outdoor retail seating. That's been raised by some of the comments today. That is limited to a 2 or 3 metre zone on the periphery of the plaza, and also provides a clean walkway around the edges. So there is still a significant part of that plaza that has been designed that doesn't belong to any of the retail and it's not necessary to buy a cup of coffee to use that space. It is true public open space. It does incorporate landscape, canopy trees, planting. It's got areas for children's play, fountains, events can be set up in that public open space. So in looking at Neutral Bay, most of the retail is facing onto Military Road, and I hear the community's concerns in terms of the traffic that does hurdle along Military Road. So this is really trying to offer a space that is away from that vehicular traffic. It does still get fantastic solar amenity in the morning. It still has a lot of landscape features, and I think it will be something that is the heart of this development. We know that at the moment, what is there is a pretty underwhelming loading dock concrete wall, blank facade presentation to Yeo Street. I think it is, we've all been to the site and we can acknowledge that there could be some improvements to that Yeo Street frontage. So the other focus of this development has been taking that retail activation around to Yeo Street, also providing a pedestrian link so that there is more permeability across the site. Again, providing safe access then for pedestrians away from those busy roads. So I think the interface to Yeo Street hasn't been done to the detriment of those residents. It really is to provide something that is a much more high quality facade and frontage to Yeo Street. So our approach in terms of prioritising that public amenity and placemaking, and that balance there has to be struck between what we're doing there for the community at the ground floor and that large dedication of public open space, offset with what we are putting up in the upper levels for the apartments. The central plaza, as I mentioned, has landscaping, has canopy trees, has a softness to it that will be enjoyed by the community. Understand that we're not looking today at what has been amended, but throughout the community consultation, what's been reiterated by everyone online today is that there is nervousness around the height of the building, in particular, how that amenity is impacting shadowing and solar access. So while we haven't reduced any of the plazas or reduced any of that public open space, the revised proposal does look to reduce the building height by 2 stories. So I think there should be some consideration or comfort in that Woolworths are responding to what we're hearing in the community. And I think we are looking to lower the height of the building so that those concerns are reduced. And so that, of course, any shadowing impacts and solar amenity is also reduced. This would essentially bring that volume in line with what was pursued under the Military Road Planning Strategy document. So that would still provide all those community benefits, but come down in volume and height to something more similar to the master plan strategy. So I think really for us, it's to replace quite an eyesore of an existing Woolworths building with something that is going to be a much more high quality and has a lot of community benefits to it. So that has been the intention throughout the proposal, and it's been done with a lot of consultation with council and the community. We understand there's still a process to go along to get this to a position, but that has been a very large part of the discussions we've had to date.
Thank you, Georgia. Now, is there anything further that Richard or Ben would like to add?
Yes, I might just say a few words, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So you've heard from Richard just about the journey that they've been on to date with council and this site, and that's been a 4-year process of working with council, being proactive participants in the Military Road Corridor study process, holding off on, at the request of council a number of years ago, holding off on submitting a site-specific planning proposal back then to enable council to complete that study, and then waiting for that study to be endorsed in April 2021 before embarking on their own journey with the planning proposal. And we really worked, all of 2021, we were working on that planning proposal to get it to a point where we were about to lodge in January 2022, which is when the rescission motion was passed by the newly elected council. So Woolworths has really, genuinely tried to be a model proponent over the last 4 years, but they've sort of been left, unfortunately, put in a position where they've had to make what is a hard decision to push ahead with their planning proposal, as they don't really have the luxury of time to wait for the council to then spend another 2 years to update the study without really any certainty around the outcome. As you've heard both Richard and Georgia speak to the fact that Woolworths undertook their own consultation sessions voluntarily, and that was really because we wanted to have an opportunity to talk firsthand with the community members. We definitely heard the concerns around the height, and you've heard about the reduction in the height. That reduction is actually not just 2 stories, it's 2 stories and 4 stories a reduction, up to a 4-story reduction on Yeo Street. So it goes from Part 7, Part 10 to Part 6 and Part 8. Now, it wasn't an easy decision to reduce the height because whilst there's suggestions that Woolworths are making a truckload of money out of this, it actually, reducing the height does make the viability challenging. And that's because you have to fund the public plaza, you've got to fund the basement, fund the public parking, those sorts of things. So, but what Woolworths recognised is that they needed to make compromises to hopefully achieve an outcome that balances the interests of all stakeholders. We know that in an ideal world, and you heard from some of the residents about they would prefer something that complies with the height limit, which is 16 metres at the moment. The reality is that if you had a building of that scale, you probably wouldn't be able to put the public plaza and a through-site link in. The supermarket would need to be at ground level like it is today. And we think that would be a really missed opportunity for Neutral Bay, given that any redevelopment of this site is likely to be there then for another 50 odd years or more. In terms of the strategic merit points, I just want to highlight that the Greater Sydney Region Plan, the North District Plan, both seek to increase housing and employment. I know the panel's very aware of that. The North District Plan identifies Neutral Bay as a local centre and notes the importance of local centres in supporting businesses and alongside larger commercial hubs. The LSPS also identifies Neutral Bay as a location for jobs growth and additional residential development, and actually highlights a capital works program by council to enhance Neutral Bay in terms of the public domain. And it talks about having a planned study area and shows a housing supply map that acknowledges the intent and appropriateness of Neutral Bay for housing. That study area was what actually then instigated the preparation of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study, which was a 3-year journey to get to that point when it was endorsed by council in 2021, with Woolworths being on that journey all the way. It was then obviously unfortunate for us that endorsement was rescinded on the 24th of January, right when we were about to submit the planning proposal. But that was, if you actually read to hear the recording of that meeting, that rescission motion was due to concerns around taller building heights, and those concerns you've heard today. And really, about 10 to 12-story heights was the real concern, and the precedent that was set for other sites along the corridor. So despite the council rescinding its support of that study, there's no doubt that the Neutral Bay area is still intended for renewal and growth. And there's no doubt that this site is likely to be intended for a public plaza and through site link, because it's a big site and an opportunity within Neutral Bay that of only a select few opportunities of sites of this scale. So I guess in terms of site-specific merit, I think the council's concerns are really relating to height, and that was a driver for the corridor strategy being updated. We've recognised that through our discussions with the community. We're wanting to reduce the height to Part 6 and Part 8, which will deliver an outcome consistent with the corridor strategy, and that represents a reduction around about 4,000 square metres of floor area. So overall, we think the proposal does have site-specific and strategic merit, but we do acknowledge that the height is a concern, and that acknowledgement is reflected in the fact that we've offered to reduce the concept. And I'll just mention as well that we do have Josh Milston here, who is our traffic planner. If the panel wanted to hear Josh speak or have any questions of him about traffic, because I know that traffic has come up a bit, but I'm sort of not in the best position to answer those questions.
So who have you got on standby to answer those questions?
Josh Milston from JMT Consulting, and he's the traffic planner on the project.
I can't see him on the screen.
Hi, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm actually out on site, so my camera's not working, but hopefully you can hear me okay.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Did you want me to speak, or did you have any specific questions that you wanted to ask based on the concerns of the community? Or?
I don't know whether you're online to hear the concerns of the community.
No, I've been online the whole time, so
right, okay.
I have heard the concerns. So I'm more than happy to talk through some of those now.
So well, if you can just address the panel briefly in response to concerns.
No, I'll do it very briefly, and then more than happy to take any questions that you might have. I think there are a number of concerns raised, and we do appreciate Neutral Bay and really all of metropolitan Sydney can experience traffic congestion, especially during peak periods. And what we've sought to do with this planning proposal is try and address some of those issues arising in Neutral Bay, and even specifically at this particular store. A couple of things. One of the concerns raised was around loading and access to the military lane loading area. What we've done as part of the reference scheme from Koichi to Carter is look at an expanded loading dock such that vehicles do not have to turn to reverse in off Yo Street into the dock at all anymore. There is the ability to drive forwards in and forwards out, and that's reflected in the site-specific DCP. So that existing requirement, given the constraints of military lane, would no longer take place. You'll be allowed safe and efficient access to that loading dock. A number of concerns were raised around Yo Street and Military Road and general traffic congestion. What we've done as part of the supporting documents in relation to the planning proposal is take on board all of Transport for New South Wales guidelines in relation to trip generation and traffic generation, and understood the different approach routes. So including Military Road, including Yo Street, including Rangers Road, and distributed that additional traffic. And the modelling that we've done, the traffic modelling that we've done, again, in accordance with relevant guidelines, has shown that all intersections actually retain their current level of service with the proposal in place. We know that Council's assessment reporting correctly noted there was a deterioration at the Military Road and Wickham Road intersection. That's not.
I'm afraid we've lost you.
That intersection.
I've lost you. I'm sorry, you're breaking up and we've lost you. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, did it cut out?
Yeah, that certainly did.
I'm so sorry. I was just concluding in relation to the traffic modelling. And then I said that was the key points I wanted to raise today, but more than happy to take any specific questions you might have now.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
On traffic. Oh.
Traffic? No. Thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your site inspection.
Not a problem.
So I think that brings us to the conclusion, unless Richard, you'd like to add anything further.
No, I don't. That's pretty much it from us. So thank you for your time today.
Yep. Thank you very much. As I said, clearly it's going to be a decision for you and Ben and Georgia in terms of you understand how we cannot consider the reduction, but that is something that then you might like to, it's a matter for you to pursue later. But in terms of our recommendation, as you're aware, we only make a recommendation to the council. So thank you very much for everybody, for the community and for the applicants team in assisting the panel in its deliberations. We'll be considering this, and the panel's recommendation to the council will be available at the latest on Monday. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That closes the public meeting at 1:30.